I want to dive into the cycle that now was with the coaching carousel being really busier than it was expected to be this year, Joe, and how you think it all kind of shook out and where things stand now in your perspective.
Well, it was a very unusual year. I mean, it didn't really start.
Yeah.
We changed the rules so that teams could talk to coaches 2 weeks before the end of the season, which would presumably push everything up and create a greater sense of urgency that we were all in a big hurry. And then we sat there for 3 weeks. And absolutely nothing happened.
Opposite effect.
It will be interesting to see over time, although I'm hoping they change that rule. I do not like coaches who are still playing in the regular season being available to be interviewed, but we'll see. In the meantime, it certainly didn't have the intended effect in year one. It was fascinating. You know, it was, I said before that it was a year in which we didn't have the typical standout defensive offensive coordinator standing out there that was clearly just, you know, waiting for the next moment to become the head coach. And hopefully that would lead to a more extensive and wider reach in the interviews that would happen. I think those things happened. Although when it's all said and done, we ended up back with a group that was probably similar to what we maybe would have guessed before the whole thing started. So I guess it lays some question to just his exposure, whether we're talking quality of hirings or whether we're talking diversity, is just merely exposure really going to make the impact that people think it will. And again, in either area, some of the teams interviewed a huge quantity of people. Denver made the first hire, but I think they also interviewed the most people and appeared to be the most organized from the outside. Now, certainly did not hire the typical top name in everybody's list. So, you know, I share Roger's view, and I hope he was being sincere. In my experience in dealing with him was that he is and is disappointed in the diversity hiring element of it. But I do think there's a number of names in here that will be really interesting to watch. I worked with Doug Pederson. Doug had success. He was supported with a strong organization. He inherited some coaches that were good. He's had to put that whole thing together by himself. So that will be an interesting challenge. And we'll really see if the owner there is truly committed to winning, which he's either been bad at hiring or isn't all in on winning. You know, Miami, they have the belief that their defense was really good and they just needed to get an offensive guy. And my feeling was that the Brian Flores' scheme was responsible for a lot of the defensive successes, and they may not be quite where they think. It was great to see the Giants take a different approach. We'll see if it worked. I do think they have two excellent coordinators, which I haven't believed for a while. I think Mike Kafka could be an emerging, you know, potential head coach down the road with some of the other people I've mentioned. There's a good 4 or 5 people out there that are really on paper as good as any head coach we've seen in a while, still not hired. So we'll see. All of these are very tough jobs. I mean, you don't hire new coaches if things haven't gone well, but sometimes you have teams that have long-term success, but maybe had a short bump in the road. These are all teams that have been struggling for a long time. So these coaches have a particularly tough challenge in my mind to really turn things around, and we'll be a little patient with them. And they need really strong support from their personnel department. So we'll see in which of those situations we really get that. You know, watching the hires, for me, it's a great sign of hope when a coach is hiring the best people versus people he knows. And it's a sign of concern when they're only hiring people they know. You can go through the list was pretty split this year, and some hiring really, really good people and doing legitimate searches for coordinators, and some going back to the old hire who I'm familiar with. So I think it will be as interesting to watch how these coaches do as it was to watch the search, because it is a little bit different and not quite as obvious a list that they picked from.
Joe, one of the words that you said there was some patience, because these teams, you know, that they don't maybe have the stability that some other teams have had along the way when they've needed a new head coach. And patience is not something that we see a lot of in the NFL. So, like, what is your advice, I guess, to these coaches who are inheriting this challenge?
So I'm a huge believer that one of the fastest ways to fail in the NFL is put too much emphasis on year one of your opportunity. And to some people, that sounds ridiculous because you can get fired after 1 year. So how can you ignore that? But here's my view. When you have a team that's winning, there is no better job that I can think of in the world, or that I personally would have rather have had. But it's also true when you're losing, these jobs are not joyful at all. the level of stress and pressure, what you bring upon your family, what your kids are hearing in school, what the media is saying about you, it's not fun at all. So for me personally, make the sacrifice to build the foundation in year one. And what I mean when I say that is hire a great staff, put yourself in good cap position for going forward, and accumulate as many assets as you can as it relates to the draft. Those are the tools you have to improve the team. If you use year one to do that, then you should be able to show meaningful improvement in year two and be good by year three. I'm not a big believer that too many coaches and too many owners are too impatient. I actually think we've seen a lot of instances where teams held on to somebody too long. Sometimes it pays off. I mean, Jason Light, after the first 6 years as a GM, didn't really look like he was doing a very good job. Certainly getting Tom Brady helped, but in year 7, he won a Super Bowl. So it's really hard to judge exactly who's the person that deserves more time and who's the person that just doesn't have the qualities that lead to sustainable success. We're going to get that tested this year because, again, as I say, a lot of these situations are in really rough shape. So an owner needs to have a little extra patience this time. So if you're seeing somebody who's a real leader, who hired a great staff, who's really hard worker, whose players responding to him, give him more time. If you sit there and you're saying, geez, I'm not sure he's quite as good a leader as we thought he was in the interview. I'm not sure he has quite as clear a vision and the clarity it takes to be a leader as we thought, then you should be thinking about making a change. I'm not suggesting after year one, but I'm suggesting at the appropriate time. The key to me is not how many years you've had the job, but are you demonstrating the qualities that we've consistently seen connect to winning? And in a head coach, that's around leadership. It's around hiring other really good coaches. It's around attention to detail. It's around a very clear philosophy. It doesn't matter what it is. I personally like to throw the ball a lot and blitz every down on defense. But I'd hire a coach without any hesitation that had the opposite philosophy, as long as he had really strong conviction about it, because people don't follow you if you have ambiguous goals. So for me, what's important is that the head coach have clarity of vision, not that he has my vision. So we'll see how that plays out. Some of them are going to need a good 2 to 3 years to even show progress.